just exactly how much money has Call of Duty made since it was first created? I've been trying to find the answer to this question ever since it popped up in my head during one of my mid-toilet philosophical deep dive sessions, where I pondered the universe and everything in it. Today I'm going to try to answer that question. Well, try is a strong word. It seems like most of the data that I need is not easily accessible or easy to trace, but I did still manage to find some sort of answer, so that is going to soothe my bathroom break-induced thirst for knowledge a little bit. Stick with me real quick, and let's do the math to see how much money Call of Duty has made since it was created. Let's get right into business here. I'm going to give you a straight answer on how much money I think Call of Duty has made based on all the evidence and data I could find. So I'm not going to waste your time in this video going over how iconic of a franchise Call of Duty is. We all have ADHD here, and we all just want to watch something that entertains us while we eat or poop, and we'll easily forget about tomorrow. We all know Call of Duty is huge and has been huge for over a decade now, but just how huge is it? How much money has Call of Duty made since it first was released in 2003? Well, we're going to try to do a deep dive here, do some simple math, and figure it out to the best of my ability. Before we jump straight to the numbers though, we do have to lay down some ground rules for the math. The math in this video is not going to be perfect because not all the sales data I needed was possible to find. Even after looking through some of the financial statements, they don't always release exact numbers for the Call of Duty titles, especially when they don't perform well. But rest assured, all of the information that I use in this video is going to be based on the most up-to-date data and analytics that I could find. Next, I'm only going to be covering the mainline game releases, so I'm not going to be including any side titles or alternative versions of the mainline games, like the ones for the PSP or DS consoles. I'm also not going to be including any microtransactions or in-game purchases either, so things like DLCs and cosmetics, even the seasonal battle pass that has no business in a full price game will not be included. Also, I won't be including Call of Duty Mobile. I consider that kind of like a spin-off game myself. To get our final number, I'm going to be using an average total based on two different price point calculations. One is going to be at $40 per copy sold, and the other one is going to be at the base price that the game was sold at when it was released. So I'll be giving you those numbers as we go along. Feel free to do the math with me, or don't. I don't really care. I just need you to keep playing the video. So now that the rules of engagement are out of the way, let's crunch some numbers. The first number we need to look at is the amount of copies sold for each Call of Duty title. These numbers are available online based on a number of sales reports from Activision/Blizzard. Like I said, some of the numbers will have to be more of an estimate though, since they tend to keep quiet when a Call of Duty installment fails to deliver as expected. I'll let you know which ones we're having to guess a little on. At the number one spot, we have Call of Duty, the game that started it all, coming in at 4.5 million copies sold. The release price for this game was $49.99, so not too far off from our low estimate price point of $40 per unit sold that we're going to be averaging it out with. This was immediately followed by Call of Duty 2 at 5.9 million copies sold, also at a release price of $49.99. Call of Duty 3 was the installment of the next year, coming in at 7.2 million copies, the first game on this list to be set at the $59.99 price point. And we all know what came next, Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare. It doubled the amount of copies sold with an estimated 15.7 to 16 million copies. This was also released at a $59.99 price point. We'll continue to see this until we hit the 2022 installment of the franchise, so I'm not just going to keep saying it over and over again. Call of Duty World at War is what happened the next year. It also hit roughly 15.7 million copies, so a back-to-back milestone for the franchise. This was followed by Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, the 2009 one, the good one. 22.7 million copies sold, so we're already hitting some crazy numbers and we're only 6 years into the franchise. Next up, we have Call of Duty Black Ops with 30.72 million copies sold. It was believed to be the highest selling COD of all time up until recently when Xbox released some new numbers after acquiring Activision/Blizzard. Call of Duty Black Ops was followed by Modern Warfare 3 with 30.71 million copies sold, so the early 2010s were absolutely insane for Call of Duty. The instant classic of Black Ops 2 is next at 31 million copies, and as of 2024 it is listed as the highest selling COD with resurgence in sales over the last year or so. And then Ghost surprisingly comes in at 28 million copies sold. I for one love this game, but I know how polarizing it was, so to me it's actually really surprising to see it still had such a high number, even though there was a slight drop off from the previous ones. The first of the hot girl movement era is next, with Advanced Warfare selling 21.78 million copies. Black Ops 3 comes steamrolling in at 26.72 million copies, and finally we see a steep drop off in sales with Infinite Warfare, taking us all the way back to Call of Duty 4 numbers, with only 14 million copies sold, which is still a lot for a video game, but insanely low for Call of Duty standards. If we're being honest here, it probably would have sold even worse if it wasn't for it being bundled with the Call of Duty 4 remaster. Another polarizing COD comes in next with the return to the World War II era and none other than Call of Duty World War II. It chips in at 19.82 million copies. Black Ops 4 performed mediocre as well, landing roughly between 15 and 24 million copies. You can see that's a pretty rough estimate, so we're going to use a margin of error here and just say 15 million copies sold. We're going to lowball them. The next year, we see a slight return to glory with Modern Warfare 2019. It's estimated to have at least 30 million copies sold, so we'll keep the number there. And back to back with the 30 mil is Black Ops Cold War, another estimated 30 million copies sold. And the only COD on this list that I can truly say I've never played, we have Vanguard with another 30 million copies sold. Probably the most disappointing ending to a three-peat in history here. And now the two most recent Call of Duties, Modern Warfare 2 2022, approximately 20 million copies sold as of 2024. As we mentioned earlier, this is also the first COD to include the $69.99 price point. And lastly, Modern Warfare 3 2023, also sold at $69.99 with a poor and roughly reported 10 million copies. Now, to be fair, sales are definitely more than this, but it's estimated to not be by a whole lot. The game's launch sales were 25% lower than Modern Warfare 2 2022's, but more accurate numbers are expected to be released when the fiscal year 23 reports are dropped, or when the new numbers for investors come out in earnings calls. So, I know that was a lot, but that's all of the mainline Call of Duty games and their sales data based off what's been given to us. So let's take that data and make our numbers. The first thing I'm going to do is get my high price point number. So we're going to take all of our games and multiply the copies sold by the base release price. So for Call of Duty 1 and 2, the $49.99 price point times 10.4 million copies sold, you get $519.9 million just between the two games. Then for all the other Call of Duties priced at $59.99, that's COD 3 all the way through Vanguard, you get a combined $22.1 billion out of 369 million copies sold total. And lastly, with the two most recent games at a price point of $69.99, you get $2.1 billion in total revenue based on 30 million copies sold. So that's a total of $24.75 billion in revenue generated in only base game copies sold at their original release price. Here's what that number looks like. Now, like I said, we're going to generate a lower number as well, based off an average of $40 per copy sold across all games, and then we're going to meet somewhere in the middle between our two numbers. So after we do the $40 per copy sold across all games, it comes out to be $16.38 billion in sales. So even when we're lowballing them, it's pretty crazy to think that the base game sales for Call of Duty across all platforms, just the base game, revenue generated is $16.38 billion in sales. So when we look at this and we take that low estimate, the $16.38 billion, and we look at the high estimate of $24.75 billion, and we meet in the middle, that gives us a total of $20.56 billion in revenue generated from all base game sales. That's an average between our low price point and our high price point. Our number looks like this. If you look at this number and you compare it to the GDP of certain countries like Malta and Luxembourg, which roughly have a GDP of 15 billion and 20 billion. Now, granted, that's over the course of a year, but Call of Duty as a franchise beats their annual GDP, which is still pretty crazy to wrap your head around. And what's insane about all of this is that that doesn't even include sales brought in off of Nicki Minaj and 21 Savage skins. This is just the average for all base game sales. It doesn't include map packs. It doesn't include any old school DLC or extra class slot packs. It is only base game sales, and we're stacking up next to GDPs. Some other things to compare this number to: Star Wars as an entire movie franchise has only grossed roughly 10 billion worldwide, When Amazon acquired Whole Foods, they did so for only $13.7 billion, still $7 billion shy of our number. And lastly, the estimated brand value of Rolex is around $8 billion, so Call of Duty's lifetime revenue is nearly 3 times the brand value of Rolex. And I know revenue is only one part of the accounting and business puzzle, but it isn't really possible to break down the exact costs of each Call of Duty and what Activision spends to keep some of them running. So revenue is the only key number I can really make my assumptions off of. Plus, it's the question that came to my mind when I was on the toilet. Let's say their profit margins on all Call of Duty games was 30%. That would still be $6.16 billion in total profit. If it were only 10%, it would still be $2.05 billion of pure profit. Want to know what makes this even crazier? The industry average profit margin on a video game is 65%, and Call of Duty, being as dominant as it is in both the FPS scene and gaming as a whole, is sure to reach an even higher number than that depending on the year and how well the game does. So with a profit margin of 65% on all this revenue, they would still profit $13.3 billion, and with a profit margin of 70 to 80%, they would see between $14.39 and $16.44 billion. So, it's safe to say Call of Duty is a giant and it's not going down anytime soon. So when looking at this, it's no wonder to see why so many game developers want a slice of the pie when it comes to the FPS genre. Call of Duty is the massive successful title that it is, has paved the way for games like X-Defiant, Valorant, Apex, and so many more. Of course, the FPS genre could have and would have always existed and grown without Call of Duty, but the massive competition and pressure that it has put on the FPS scene over the years has arguably been the best thing for the scene. So many other developers want to take a shot at the genre, and it's the fierce competition that often gives us the best products. So what's next for the clinically obese cash cow that Call of Duty is? Will the release of Black Ops 6 break records for the franchise? Will we ever see the fall of this dominant force in the gaming market? Time will tell where the franchise goes from here and just how high the revenue number can reach. But according to my calculations, this franchise is not going anywhere anytime soon. And if Black Ops 6 does well, it may be the game to bring back yet another golden era for Call of Duty. And now, I have the stereotypical YouTuber questions for you. Do you agree with my math? I'm by no means a math expert, so can you calculate it better than me? Tell me what you think in the comments below, and let me know if you want to see more financial breakdowns of video game franchises or companies in the future. I've got a lot more content planned, so be sure to subscribe and turn those notifications on if you enjoyed this. As always, thanks for watching everyone. Stay safe.